is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming at you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and today's episode's all killer, no filler. Jim Zub is back again, here to talk to us about the Young Adventurer's Guides, Wizards and Spells. The book is out tomorrow, March the 10th. Today, we're going to chat about all things Wizards and Spells, everything that has to do with the Young Adventurer's Guides, some of his comic work, and some surprises that are coming out in the future. So without further ado, the hardest working man in storytelling today, Jim Zub. Hey Jim, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
We are so psyched to have you back on the show. When you hit me up the other day through email, seeing if we had any time to squeeze you in, I was like, hell to the yeah, because I am dying to talk to you about a few things. Most importantly, though, the Young Adventurer's Guides, Wizards and Spells, which is out in stores tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah, we are so excited to finally have this book out. I know on our original plan, we wanted to have this out by the end of 2019, but quality-wise, it was something where once the decision was made to make all the artwork inside new for all the Young Adventurer's Guides, we had to push things back just to make sure we had enough time in our production schedule. But now, finally, Book 4 is imminent, and I can't wait for people to have it in their hands.
Well, good things are worth waiting for, and I will tell you, Stu got an advance copy, so he actually has it in his hands right now.
Oh,
paging
perfect.
through it now. Everybody be jealous.
Yeah, I'm jealous. I read the PDF ahead of this interview, and I am very jealous.
Yeah, it's a beauty. Like the other ones, I think it just turned out wonderfully, and it really exemplifies the kind of qualities, we want the whole line to have in terms of great art, really easy to digest material, and just fun ideas to promote storytelling,
The whole presentation of the package of these books reminds me of something from my childhood, and I can't tell what it is. And I'm not sure that I'm supposed to. I think that might be by design on a certain level.
Yeah, I don't think we have one specific kind of product that we were aping, but we definitely wanted it to have that feel of the kind of book that you would pore over as a kid time and time again. And hopefully, that imagery really sticks in your mind and gets you excited and inspired. I mean, that's what the Monster Manual felt like to me, but even books on castles or on the supernatural, I used to just sort of dig into those books in the library and borrow them over and over again. There was another one on I think it's called Our Universe or something, and it was all these science fiction and space kind of landscapes. And I remember a bunch of imagery from those books when I was a kid. It would be a dream, to have that kind of effect on another generation of readers, young or old, and have this stuff stick with them and inspire them for years to come,
Yeah, there was a series, Usborne put them out. It was called Mysterious World or something. And there was a ghost book, a UFOs book, and a monsters book.
Absolutely. Those were awesome.
The layout was different, but it's that vibe. And I feel like that's a vibe that's sort of been lost to time a little bit. You don't really get cool books like that anymore. And I gotta say, some of the art in this book is a little bit on the creepy side, and I like it.
What's been amazing is watching the crew over at Jetpack 7 get more and more confident with the kind of stuff that we want to do here and feel like we can push out into all kinds of areas. But I think it's okay to have it a bit creepy. I think it's okay to have stuff that surprises and kind of shocks. Kids in particular, I think, get excited about that. Some of the monster choices we had in Monsters and Creatures, they're not all friendly. They're not all nice. There's lots of really weird ones and funky ones and, the undead and everything else.
Yeah, and I definitely always gravitated to creepy as a kid. But the clone illustration of Mordekainen sort of staring at himself in a casket is there's a lot going on here.
Yeah. What's fun too is for some of the legendaries, we've made up original characters just for the series, and then we're doing some harkening back to classics. We've got Mordenkainen as the legendary wizard and stuff like that. So I think it's fun to be able to do both, to be able to build out little areas of the canon, but also nod to kind of classic D&D elements that people, older readers may recognize.
Look at you pronouncing Mordenkainen correctly.
Well, thank God someone had to, because I can't, Stu.
I know how to say it, and I just can't when I actually want to say it out loud. The N in the middle just doesn't happen.
Probably my favorite illustration in the whole book. And it seems weird because we're on an audio podcast talking about art in the book, but the Otto's irresistible dance makes me so happy.
So good.
So it's this halfling bard who's playing a jig, and there's an owl bear dancing.
I just found it.
As my favorite. I absolutely love that piece. You know, you write the art notes and you hope that it lives up to it. And sometimes it surpasses it to such a degree you can't even believe it.
One of the things that I appreciate most about this book is that it does straddle the line where, you know, in most cases when you are, say, writing something for a younger audience, but in a lot of ways appealing to an older audience, your foggy vision of nostalgia is always kind of flashing before your eyes. And some people kind of always go for the cheap joke that is going to pop the older crowd that the younger kids aren't probably going to get. But in this book, you guys take really nice steps to kind of remind people of the comic books that they grew up with as a kid. Like for me specifically, I'm looking at the character class page and you have all the different headshots there, and it's very reminiscent to me of that Mighty Marvel style where you'd open up the comic and you'd see all the headshots of the characters with their name underneath it.
Oh, totally.
Or like in the upper left-hand corner of the
Yeah.
cover where it's
Oh.
like these 4 guys are going to be in this issue, and it's like, yeah.
That's right. Again, we wanted to have this really iconic feel that people could see themselves in these characters and they can build out their ideas. That's what the official handbook of the Marvel Universe was to me as well. It's like
Oh, yeah.
these kinds of guidebooks, like when you're a kid or when you're just starting into this hobby, I think codification is a big part of it. Before you realize how open-ended tabletop role-playing games are and that there is no wrong way to do it as long as you're having fun, there's a feeling of, I want to do it right. Tell me that I'm not screwing this up. Tell me that I'm following the rules. Tell me that I'm not going to break it or do it wrong. And so part of our goal is to give guidance and to encourage creativity, but also to say, look, here are some visual ideas or here are some main broad points so you can sort of pour yourself into these ideas and know that you're doing it, quote, right. And again, I think the more you dig into it, the more you realize the creativity involved in it rather than it being like a very set series of decisions to be made, you know?
Oh, 100%. And I think that you do a great job with it insofar as explaining what the things are. And that's been a thread that's been going through all of these books. Like, what does this weapon do? You know, why do you do this? Why do you do that? Something as small as the magic missile drawing and the explanation of what it is. I remember sitting at the table myself and being like, so what's magic missile? And I'm like, in my brain, I'm thinking the missiles look like the missile from like the Rocket from the Crypt logo. And they're like, no, it's just like these 3 little fireballs that like shoot out of your fingers or how many ever, depending on your level. And it's just something that I don't know that I could fully wrap my head around as a young gamer. And then like I watch my goddaughter as she's sitting there coloring and she's learning about shapes and this, that, and the other thing. And you really realize that when you're a kid, you are much more apt to visual learning and how you pick things up through like visual explanations and like songs and sounds. And I think that these books do a great job of that, even for like an older player where now I kind of understand like how Magic Missile is supposed to look or web, unlike the way that Sean Dillon described it. It's like, wow, you remember it's like Spider-Man when he shoots his web and he catches his bad guys in the webs. That's what web looks like.
One of the toughest decisions with this book in particular was the decision that we were going to pare back and just focus on a handful of spells, because you looked at it and we said, okay, you know, we obviously can't profile them all. And I'd rather have really evocative imagery and sort of build out individual spells that feel very strong in terms of storytelling rather than trying to hit more of them and have, you know, in some ways kind of the same problem that the player's handbook can have, where you have one piece of art for maybe every dozen spells. And so for me, I thought, you know, with the visual end of it, I want to hit every single one as strong as we can. So we're going to have, you know, one per page and make them as interesting and evocative as possible.
So talk to me about how much of a headache it was to pare down all the spells to get with what you ended up in this book.
It was rough. Like, I think we could have always adjusted our choices, like, you know, and it was a constant conversation because we wanted to pick spells that felt classic, so they feel like very, very D&D, but we didn't want them to all be combat spells, and we didn't want them to all be divine or arcane. We wanted it to cover a spread. There was discussion about maybe just doing entry-level spells, but then I thought, you know what? When I was a kid, I wanted to read about powerful stuff. I wanted to know what the future held for big, epic, legendary characters.
It's aspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. And the kids are going to dig into the game. They're going to realize that for every spell that's here, there's a half dozen more to choose from. It's like this is just the opening salvo of ideas. So let's pick ones that are visually interesting, that we can hopefully say something about more than what's just the description in the player's handbook, that we could give you tips, that we could give you different strategies, get you thinking about how encounters are more than just combat, that you can do all kinds of different things with magic, that you can use them in unexpected and creative ways. And so to me, that was what really mattered most, was sort of trying to pare down to this really fine list of cool and exotic and funky spells that would hopefully inspire people. One of my favorite spells in all of D&D is Prestidigitation, which is a, cantrip, but it allows you to do really fun role-playing obvious magic. That's the spell where you go into the tavern and the bard starts singing, and then you create all this imagery to go alongside it, or all of a sudden there's magical sounds ricocheting around the room, or everyone's covered in mud and you're perfectly clean and looking awesome. Like, it's just such a evocative and engaging kind of spell that has almost no statistical advantage, but is so story centric. And I'm like, well, we got to do that. We got to do fun things like that. Just go and hit the tops of kind of the depth and breadth of what's possible with magic in the worlds of D&D.
And to that, you also see the other side of the spectrum, which 7th level, you put a resurrection spell in this book.
Yeah, we were trying to hit different ends of the spectrum. So we wanted to show that both divine and arcane magic had really powerful stuff at their disposal. And healing, of course, is a big part of, cleric and other divine magic. And so we were like, okay, resurrection's important. I think when kids are making their own stories, this idea of your heroism, you might make a sacrifice, but that doesn't mean you can't come back. You know what I mean? If the situation warrants or the story warrants it.
So this is all really interesting to me because we're sort of talking about magic systems for D&D without their mechanical component.
That was tough.
But it kind of makes it cooler, right? Like, if you get rid of all the stats and the min-maxing and like how it breaks your basic rules, and you just start talking about like the magic and how it affects things and how it changes story and the dynamics of combat without like getting into the nitty-gritty of like how much damage it does, like it just becomes like this magical thing.
I think it's more evocative.
Yeah.
The minute you put a number to it, the kid's going to say, well, okay, this spell does more damage than that spell, so I use this one. But a cool piece of art and a great description kind of has no limits. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's where a spell like Tree Stride, you're like, who cares if you looked at it statistically? But man, what a cool looking spell, and what a neat idea of being able to step into one tree and then step out from another. Like, that is so cool. That is such a neat thing that as a kid, I would love to do that. Imagine you're playing hide and seek and you could go into a forest and you go in one spot and you pop out another. Like, that is, to a kid, that feels really rich and that feels really full and exciting. Animate objects is another really cool one that on its base level of statistics, you look and you go, okay, so I'm going to make a bunch of things move around. But then you imagine it as a kid and you're like, imagine everything in this room or all these items coming to life and moving around and dancing and doing stuff. That's cool.
Like a Disney movie.
Yeah, like Beauty and the Beast.
Right. Like any of those things. Polymorph and stone shape and all those things. These are the kinds of spells that I think promote storytelling. Speak with Dead was another one that we talked about back and forth. And, it was discussion of, okay, do we want to do creepy stuff like that? And I was like, yes, we do. I think that stuff's really neat. The idea to talk to ghosts and get information from them, I think is really interesting. And I think that leads to storytelling possibilities, right? And then, you hit all your classics. You've got your magic missile and, you've got everything from Ice Storm to, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have Meteor Swarm in there, which is like, huge, crazy 9th level magic.
That is in there.
It is an offensive spell. Just, we do want to show combat stuff, but also non-combat, opportunities and everything kind of in between. But yeah, just getting the list down was a real chore. Stacy and Andrew and I really talked it back and forth, and you're like fighting for your favorites, It's fun.
Yeah, how do you pick just one?
Well, that was the thing, is sometimes it would be a visual. Like, we'd have a choice of 3 spells And I'd go, look, this one's going to have the coolest piece of art associated with it, and that's going to stick in someone's mind. Or we would think about the spell tips. So every spell has your base description, and then each one has anywhere between 1 and 3 kind of tips that we give about how to use a spell or maybe an unexpected side benefit of it. And those are not necessarily things that are in the player's handbook. And so we're trying to brainstorm stuff beyond what's in the base spell descriptions. And so some of them, that would be the kind of thing that would tip us over the top. Like, oh, we can show this cool idea about how magic can be used, or here's an application of it in order to make it function, you know?
So talk to me a little bit about the addition of the magic weapons in this book, which I thought was a really nice touch and a nice way to tie the whole wizard and spells book together.
Right. So in the Warriors and Weapons book, we've got all the martial classes and we have irregular equipment. So it just made sense to me if we were going to have a book focused all on magic wielding classes, that we would use the magic items as well. And so, you know, a similar kind of section in this book goes through some iconic magic items, some really neat magic items. And, you know, like with the spells, we say, look, we're just kind of tip of the iceberg, but here's some cool things that you can, you know, leap off from in terms of storytelling. There's also some plot threads that we kind of thematically carry through the books. So I'll give you an example. In the Warriors and Weapons book, one of the adventuring kits that we have was the Vampire Hunter. And then in the Monsters and Creatures book, we've got one of the legendary creatures is Strahd von Zarovich. In Dungeons and Tombs, we have Castle Ravenloft. And here in Wizards and Spells, we have the Sun Sword.
Ah, yes.
So thematically, they all hold together with Curse of Strahd, and they clearly attach to each other, but the reader gets to discover that. They get to mix it all together and go, oh, of course, well, that works against undead, and therefore I want to use that here. Let's tell a story about going to Castle Ravenloft.
That is such a nice, subtle touch.
Yeah, and you could sort of discover them in any order. You could read Wizards and Spells first and go, oh, this is a cool sword that, you know, works against the undead. And then you read Dungeons and Tombs, and then you realize, oh, okay, this all ties together. So it was just a way for us to kind of tie interesting plot points into each other and sort of thematically show that all this stuff is linked.
So I'm taking it you were a big fan of Ravenloft growing up.
Oh, huge. It's one of my absolute favorite modules when I was a kid. I actually have like 2 copies of it here in my house. I've got Curse of Strahd. I've got the one they did for 2nd edition, like the Ravenloft setting one. And then I also have the new 5th edition Curse of Strahd as well. So
good.
Yeah. Absolutely love that module, and it's so evocative and atmospheric and interesting. You know, it's an absolute classic, and so it just made sense to me that we would tie into that. But you know, in the Dungeons and Tombs books, we've got little pieces of a bunch of classic modules, so many of which have been updated. Everything from the Temple of Elemental Evil to, you know, the Sea Ghost from Saltmarsh and everything else. It's a way for us to kind of give a nod to the past, but also, you know, I think that's one of the things that 5th edition has done so well, has updated some of these classic adventures and elements, you know, and kept the best parts and the most kind of atmospheric parts of D&D in mind.
We've been talking a lot through these books about like connecting to the past and kind of keeping like one foot on the past. Let's talk about the future a little bit. Now, This is the 4th book that has come out in the series. What's next for the Young Adventurers Guides?
Well, it's done. It's finished. He did everything that he came to do.
I am hoping not.
See, this is what was so fascinating to me was, you know, the original discussion was about, okay, let's do a Young Adventurer's Guide to Dungeons and Dragons, which then became, in our original proposal, like a hero book and a monster book, which then became a hero book and a magic book and a monster book. And then we were like, well, we need dungeons. And so it just keeps growing because I think we realized, first of all, the subjects are so interesting and the response to the series has been so amazing. And the one thing we've gotten over and over and over again from our readers and from the publisher and from distributors and libraries is they're like, kids love these books. They're digging into them in the way that we hoped they had. And of course, probably the most popular one is Monsters and Creatures because kids love monsters. It just ignites their imagination. And, you know, we barely scratched the surface of what's possible in Monsters and Creatures. We hit a lot of iconic creatures, but there are tons that, sort of like with the spells here, we had to, you know, make a choice, and we're like, oh, okay, we're going to lean on this side, or we're going to try this one instead of the other. So when Wizards of the Coast and 10 Speed came back to us and said, are you guys interested in doing more? The first question was, where do we go from here? And I said, well, we got to do another monster book, because everything that we had to cut that we weren't able to fit in Monsters and Creatures, plus so many other iconic ones that I absolutely love, I would love to dig into. And so I'm very happy to announce Book 5 is in development, and it's going to be out this year, and it's called Beasts and Behemoths.
Oh, this is the best news. Love it.
Yes.
Love more monsters.
We are so happy. When we did Monsters and Creatures, we started underground thematically, and then we worked our way up to the surface, and then we went up into the sky. So we finished with dragons. It was a different way of organizing monsters, because now you were thinking about them as locations, and you were thinking about them in terms of spaces that they were found in. This time, Beasts and Behemoths is a whole new horde of creatures, but how we're organizing them is by size. So we're starting at tiny and small, then we go to medium size, then we go to large, huge, and we end with gargantuan creatures. And so you can imagine a kid reading through the book in order, and it's like everything's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, it's getting bigger, until we get to the end, and that's when we finish with, some of the biggest creatures in all of D&D canon.
So I don't want to ask you to do anything for me, but could you put like a fold-out size comparison sheet in the back?
Oh man, that would be amazing.
I love those.
I know, we love that stuff too. Like, that was one of the things, is the visual element of it. When in Monsters and Creatures, when we describe the creatures, we try and relay them to things that people can easily visualize. Hey, this thing is longer than a school bus. Hey, this is taller than a 2-story house, stuff like that, so that you have an immediate frame of reference for them. And that was a real important point to me, that we were going to use more colloquial kind of language, and we were going to use the kinds of things that our readers, people who are discovering role-playing in D&D, can instantly attribute to. And that's unusual, because normally the D&D books are much more kind of formalized in terms of measurement. And I said, look, we're going to a younger audience. We need to give them a feeling. Look, a beholder's like a giant beach ball. Like, these are the kinds of things you need to be able to understand in order to imagine this stuff happening around you. And so Beasts and Behemoths, when we were talking about how to organize it, the original thought was, oh, we'll just do the same kind of thing as last time. We'll start underground and we'll go into the sky. And I was like, no, I don't want to repeat that. There's other ways to think about these spaces. And then size came up, and I thought, that's it. That's the easiest way to do it. And it's a whole other kind of way of visualizing encounters,
Yeah, I think that's huge. And I think that...
Huge. He said
it's gargantuan.
Oh, man. I walked right into that one.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this is a great way, and these books continue to be a stellar way for young adventurers to really get a foothold at the gaming table and really understand what they're getting themselves into and the stories that they want to tell. So I am completely in love with this book, and I am more and more excited for each one of these volumes as they come out. So, dude, thank you for creating such a stellar line of books.
The feedback we get from people, like, readers, obviously, and kids, retailers, librarians, has been so heartwarming. I got a tweet from this teacher who runs a school club, and they can't wait for Wizards and Spells, and they're like trying to generate characters for their D&D club, and they've been using the flowchart that's in Warriors and Weapons, and they're like, can you please send us the flowchart from Wizards and Spells? We promise we'll buy the book. We just want to have it for generating characters, because it's so useful, because you can ask a handful of questions and you get, a response. You get a sense of what your choices should be and how it should all fit together. And so I sent them a screenshot of the flowchart, because that's all I want. I want to encourage people to dig into these things. I want them to feel excited about the possibilities at their fingertips, And so part of it is about trying to codify and give cool ideas. And part of it is just like reconnecting to my own exuberance for D&D from when I was a kid. And that's so important to me, is that when Stacy and Andrew and I sit around, brainstorming stuff that's going to go into these books, or which creatures or which spells, and we have these little arguments about which ones are the coolest, like, it's the best feeling. We can't lose, someone's going to get their favorite in there. It's going to be cool. We're going to get this new amazing piece of artwork, and then we're just going to pour our enthusiasm for that out on the page. And hopefully, if we do it right, it carries through and you're more excited to use these creatures or imagine yourself encountering them, you know?
I'm just saying that if this was one of the books that would have been on the bookmobile as a kid, I totally would have joined Safety Patrol, so I would have gotten first pick, so the jerky kids down the block didn't get this before me.
Right?
I'm just saying.
And we've come full circle, man. D&D in classrooms, teachers, after school clubs.
I know.
Like, finally.
It's so mind-blowing to me that we're at this point where it's not even an issue anymore. It's really about kids being creative and coming up with ideas and collaborating with each other. You know, that's what's so valuable about it. That's what's so amazing about it. And the ability to create something like this that hopefully carries with new players for years to come. That is the dream. We've been getting photos of foreign editions that have started to come out. So the books
cool.
are available in, okay, I could get this wrong. I've seen them in French, Spanish, Portuguese, maybe Italian. I'm not sure. There's a bunch. And that's been really, really heartwarming because a lot of the publishers who are putting out the D&D books in other languages, they see this as a natural evolution of their line of books, that this is exactly the audience that they want as well, you know?
Absolutely, man. And I think that's wonderful because that means even more children are included in the process of getting into D&D at the perfect age.
Yeah, and I think that it speaks really strongly to the format choice, and it speaks strongly that I think if we would have just reused artwork from the Monster Manual and the Player's Handbook, it would have been a harder kind of sell. It's a little bit more like, well, I kind of have this already. And we're like, no, these books are not miniaturized versions of the Player's Handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide or the Monster Manual. They are, you know, adjacent to, and they speak to qualities within those books, but in a very different way. And I think that the fact that the books are filled with all new artwork goes a long way to stressing that these are their own thing that obviously are meant to build, you know, players and dungeon masters of the future, and that they will pick up the starter set and they will get the essential kit and the Player's Handbook and all that stuff. But that doesn't mean that these books are then no longer useful, you know?
Absolutely, man. And, you know, since I am a comic fan as well, I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this next question. I'm currently reading Infernal Tides.
Sweet.
And what I want to know is, since you have invented some legendary characters for wizards and spells, any chance of some of these characters popping up in one of your comics down the line?
So this is one of the discussions that we've had, is trying to get that cross-pollination. I think Wizards has been really good about that kind of stuff. So for example, a lot of the comic book characters have now shown up in places like Idle Champions, the D&D mobile game.
Right.
A couple of them have showed up in other video games that they're working on.
Dungeon Mayhem as well, the card game.
Dungeon Mayhem. Actually, I was so shocked that, you know, I knew Minsk and Boo were going to be in Dungeon Mayhem, and they sent me the card pack, and I cracked open Minsk's deck, and lo and behold, there's Neris and Krydal and Shandy as cards to work with Minsk and Boo. And I was just like, oh my gosh, they didn't tell me that was happening. That is such a cool feeling to know that, you know, Max and I made these characters for the comics, and now they're in all kinds of different places. And so one of the reasons why we wanted to make new legendary characters is because, to be 100% honest, a lot of the older characters from D&D, there were a lot of men and there was a lot of human characters. And we're like, we want to show different race class combinations and unexpected ones. And then on top of that, we thought, hey, let's make some new D&D characters. This is always going to be fun. And hopefully build them out in a way where if people are excited about them, we want to tell their stories, whether that's in a novel or in a graphic novel or in a, you know, comic story, or have them appear somewhere down the line. For me, it's all the same world and it all connects together in fun and unexpected ways. And so a very long way of saying, I definitely want that to happen. And it's an ongoing sort of discussion that we're having about how to keep the line going beyond 5 books, you know, what shape and space is possible down the line and where these characters might appear elsewhere. I think it's really valuable to have these characters carry on, that this, you know, line of books keeps going, because there's so much possibility there. And that kids, particularly at that age, one of the ways they become regular readers and they become really invested in this stuff is if they know there's new stuff coming every 4, 5, 6 months.
Right on, man. So, Jim, it has been amazing chatting with you again. You have anything else coming out you want to chat about?
Well, I mean, I'm always working on different comic book projects. I've got obviously Dungeons & Dragons Infernal Tides, which is the D&D comic series that is coming out right now. We've got more cool comic plans for D&D in the future. I'm always doing stuff over at Marvel. I just took over Conan the Barbarian on a monthly basis, which
Amazing.
is like a bucket list thing for me as a kid. I grew up reading obviously tons of Robert E. Howard and the Conan books and comics. And so being the new regular writer of Conan is a real dream come true. So if you like some of the stuff I've been doing in D&D, I would highly recommend you check in with Conan the Barbarian number 13 and beyond. We've got a really cool story that we're building there. You know, Wizards and Spells will be out by the time you're listening to this. Please go check it out. And Beasts and Behemoths will be arriving, looks like October 20th.
Ooh.
And we're already proofing the book, and art is coming in, and it just looks stunning. I think with each one, we're getting more comfortable and more like we're just in a really good groove on these books. So I'm so pumped for people to see what we've put into this one. I won't reveal all the creatures that are in Beasts and Behemoths, but, you know, last time we had the chromatic dragons, so this time we've got the metallic one.
Oh, yes.
So it's just a natural pairing of the two monster books, and can't wait for people to check it out.
All right, Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Jim Zub for coming on the show to talk about the Young Adventurer's Guides, Wizards, and Spells. The book is in stores on March the 10th. I encourage all of you to go out and pick it up. I know you're going to love it. Folks, this was another amazing episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. For Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.